Welcome to this moment that feels heavy with anticipation because something you've been waiting on is finally shifting. For a long time, it seemed like the drama never stopped. Accusations, delays, confusion, manipulation, and silence wrapped around your situation like a storm that wouldn't break. You questioned yourself. You replayed conversations. You wondered how someone could create so much chaos and still walk away untouched. But hear this clearly, storms don't last forever, and truth has a way of surfacing right on time. Right now, the tables are turning. The one who thrived on confusion, who stirred conflict and hid behind excuses, is facing consequences they can no longer escape. What was done in the dark is being exposed in the light. Legal pressure, accountability, and justice are stepping in where excuses once lived. This isn't about revenge. This is about restoration. This is about balance being restored where imbalance ruled for far too long. And yes, let's talk about what was taken from you. The money, the resources, the opportunities delayed because someone else chose deception over integrity. You didn't imagine the loss. You didn't exaggerate the damage. You endured it. You survived it. And now the season is shifting from loss to return. What was held up is being released. What was blocked is finding its way back to you. This moment is bigger than finances. It's about validation. It's about peace replacing anxiety. It's about standing tall again without explaining your side to people who never listened anyway. You stayed patient when it hurt. You stayed grounded when chaos tried to pull you under. And now justice is moving in your favor. So take a breath, lift your head, pay attention. Because this isn't coincidence. This is alignment. And what's coming back to you will remind you why you were told to hold on just a little longer. The truth is finally catching up to the one who created chaos and confusion, and this moment didn't arrive by accident. For a long time, it felt like lies moved faster than facts, like manipulation had a head start, like the loudest voice in the room controlled the narrative while reality was pushed into the corner. You watched stories change, excuses multiply, and blame get redirected again and again. It was exhausting to witness someone twist situations, pit people against each other, and walk away pretending innocence while damage was left behind. But the truth has a weight that deception can't carry forever, and eventually the burden becomes too heavy. What many people don't realize is that chaos always leaves fingerprints. Every contradiction, every exaggerated claim, every half-truth stacks up quietly. While it may look like the drama maker is winning in the moment, they are actually building the very case that will expose them. Truth doesn't need to rush. It doesn't need to shout. It waits, it observes, and it gathers evidence through time. And now, time has done its job. Patterns are visible. Stories no longer line up. People who once believed the performance are starting to notice the cracks. You may have spent nights replaying events, wondering if speaking up sooner would have changed anything, questioning whether staying silent made you look weak. But silence is not the same as surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes it's protection. While you were holding yourself together, the truth was doing its quiet work. Every document, every message, every action taken in arrogance has been recorded in ways the drama maker never expected. And now, the very things they used to intimidate others are becoming the evidence that corners them. There is a shift that happens when truth begins to surface. Suddenly, the person who controlled the narrative starts reacting instead of directing. Their confidence turns into defensiveness. Their charm turns into desperation. Their threats lose power because they no longer intimidate the way they once did. This is how you know truth is closing in. When explanations become frantic and stories need constant revision, exposure is already underway. You didn't need to chase justice. You didn't need to force accountability. You didn't need to destroy anyone to be vindicated. Truth does that work without becoming corrupted in the process. It corrects without cruelty. It exposes without exaggeration. And it does so in a way that cannot be undone. Once truth stands up, it doesn't sit back down just because someone is uncomfortable. What's powerful about this moment is that it's not fueled by emotion, but by clarity. This isn't about proving who was right in an argument. This is about revealing who was dishonest in action. Chaos can confuse people temporarily, but it can't rewrite reality permanently. Eventually, facts demand acknowledgement. Eventually, accountability shows up without needing an invitation. As this unfolds, you may notice a strange calm replacing the anxiety you carried for so long. That calm comes from knowing you don't have to defend yourself anymore. The truth is speaking now, and it speaks louder than any accusation ever did. People are starting to see what you endured, not because you explained it, but because the truth made it undeniable. This moment also restores something inside you. It reminds you that integrity has value even when it feels costly. It shows you that patience is not weakness and endurance is not failure. You were never losing time. You were allowing the truth to mature. And now, as it comes forward, it does so with authority, clarity, and weight. The chaos maker thrived on confusion because confusion kept people distracted. But truth brings focus, and focus brings consequences. When clarity enters the situation, there's nowhere left to hide. The spotlight doesn't need to accuse, it simply reveals, and what it reveals cannot be unseen. You may not hear apologies, you may not receive public acknowledgments, but justice doesn't always come with speeches. Sometimes it comes with silence, consequences, and the sudden collapse of false power. And when that happens, the truth doesn't celebrate. It simply stands unshaken, proven, and complete legal accountability is replacing manipulation and false narratives, and this shift changes everything. For a long time, manipulation thrived because there were no boundaries strong enough to stop it. Stories were crafted to confuse, pressure was applied to intimidate, and half-truths were repeated until they sounded believable. The drama maker relied on influence, emotional control, and fear to stay ahead. But influence fades when facts step in, and fear loses power when rules are enforced. There is a big difference between controlling a story and standing before the law. Manipulation works best in shadows, where details are blurry and people are unsure of their footing. Legal accountability demands clarity. It demands timelines, records, consistency, and proof. It doesn't respond to charm or intimidation. It doesn't care how convincing someone sounds when evidence tells a different story. This is where false narratives begin to crumble, because they were never built to withstand scrutiny. What once felt untouchable now feels exposed. The same person who spoke confidently now chooses words carefully. The same person who accused others now avoids direct answers. When legal systems step in, the game changes. There are no emotional loopholes, no dramatic exits, no rewriting events to suit the moment. Facts remain fixed and contradictions stand out sharply. This is why manipulation fails under accountability. It cannot survive structure. You may have felt powerless while watching lies circulate freely, wondering how long deception could continue unchecked. But accountability moves at its own pace, and when it arrives, it doesn't rush. Examines everything. Every transaction, every agreement, every communication becomes part of a clear picture. And once that picture forms, it doesn't bend for anyone's comfort. This is also the moment where pressure shifts away from you. For so long, you carried the weight of defending your truth, of staying composed while being misrepresented. Now the responsibility has moved. Those who created false narratives must explain themselves. An explanation is difficult when lies were used as shortcuts. What once felt like clever manipulation now feels like a trap of their own making. There is something deeply stabilizing about accountability. It brings order to chaos. It separates emotion from fact. It creates a level ground where no one stands above the rules. When this happens, the fog lifts, confusion clears. What was once overwhelming starts to make sense. You begin to see how everything aligns, how every delay served a purpose, how every detail mattered. False narratives collapse not because someone argues harder, but because truth stands still. It doesn't need embellishment. It doesn't need to perform. It simply exists. And when systems designed to protect fairness engage with that truth, manipulation has nowhere to go. The pressure intensifies not through confrontation, but through exposure. This process may not be loud or dramatic. It may unfold quietly through documents, hearings, reviews, and decisions. But quiet doesn't mean weak. In fact, quiet accountability is often the most powerful. It reshapes outcomes without spectacle. It enforces consequences without needing public validation. As this unfolds, you may notice the emotional grip loosening. The anxiety that once followed every update begins to fade. Confidence returns, not because you're celebrating someone else's downfall, but because stability is being restored. There is relief in knowing that integrity is finally being backed by structure, that truth is no longer standing alone. This moment also teaches a powerful lesson. Manipulation may delay justice, but it cannot deny it forever. False narratives may dominate conversations temporarily, but they cannot outlive documented truth. Accountability doesn't argue, it confirms. And once it confirms, the outcome becomes inevitable. What once felt like a personal battle is now a matter of record. And records don't forget, they don't shift with moods. They don't respond to pressure, they hold steady. And in that steadiness, justice gains its strength. What was unjustly taken is being positioned for return, even if it hasn't reached your hands yet. For a long time, loss felt permanent. Money disappeared without explanation. Opportunities stalled, agreements were broken. Promises were made and then quietly erased. You were left carrying the consequences of someone else's decisions while they acted as if nothing had happened. That kind of loss doesn't just affect your bank account, it affects your sense of safety, your trust, your ability to plan without fear. And yet, what was taken was never forgotten. Return doesn't always start with a deposit or a check. It starts with alignment. It begins when the systems, people, and circumstances that once blocked recovery start shifting into place. Conversations change. Paperwork resurfaces. Decisions that were delayed suddenly move forward. What felt frozen begins to thaw. This is how restoration works. It moves quietly before it moves visibly. You may have questioned whether it was even worth hoping again. After all, disappointment teaches people to expect less. But positioning happens long before receiving. Behind-the-scenes facts are being reviewed, records examined, and accountability enforced. Each step creates space for what belongs to you to find its way back. Nothing returns randomly. It returns because the path has been cleared. There is also a deeper return taking place. When something is taken unjustly, it steals confidence along with resources. It makes you doubt your judgment. It makes you hesitate before trusting again. As restoration unfolds, that inner confidence begins to rebuild. You start believing in your ability to recover, to rebuild, to stand steady again. That inner restoration is just as important as the financial one. This process requires patience, not because justice is slow, but because it is thorough. Every detail matters. Every dollar has a story. Every transaction leaves a trail. What once felt like a dead end now reveals itself as a longer route toward a more complete outcome. Shortcuts would have left gaps. This path ensures closure. You might notice that the people who benefited from your loss are suddenly uncomfortable. Confidence fades, control slips. That discomfort is a sign of movement. When return becomes possible, resistance often appears first. But resistance doesn't stop what is already in motion. It only confirms that something is shifting. There is also a lesson in this moment. What is taken without integrity rarely brings peace to the one who takes it. Ill-gotten gain carries pressure, fear, and instability. Meanwhile, what is returned carries relief, validation, and grounding. This is not just about money changing hands. It's about balance being restored where imbalance once ruled. You didn't imagine the loss. You didn't exaggerate the damage. And you don't need to minimize what it cost you just to appear strong. Strength is not pretending it didn't hurt. Strength is standing long enough to see restoration begin. And now, that beginning is visible. As positioning continues, doors open that once stayed shut. Support appears where resistance lived. Clarity replaces confusion. You start to see how everything connects, how timing protected you, how delays prevented further harm. Even what was taken becomes part of a larger correction. This return may come in stages, partial recoveries, unexpected compensations, opportunities that replace what was lost in different forms. Restoration is not always a mirror image of loss. Sometimes it comes back stronger, wiser, and more secure than before. What matters is that the cycle is reversing. You are not chasing what belongs to you. It is being guided back. Alignment does that. Justice does that. And when the return arrives, it will not feel rushed or chaotic. It will feel settled, grounded, and undeniable. Patience through the storm is now turning into visible justice, even if for a long time it felt like nothing was changing. You waited while answers were delayed. You stayed steady while uncertainty tried to wear you down. There were moments when patience didn't feel noble, it felt forced, like you had no other choice. You watched deadlines pass, watched promises get postponed, watched progress slow to a crawl, and still you held your ground. That kind of patience is not passive. It is endurance under pressure. Storms distort perception when you're inside them. It's hard to tell whether you're moving forward or just surviving. Noise surrounds you. Emotions rise. Everything feels urgent and unresolved at the same time. In those moments, patience becomes a shield, not because it makes the storm gentler, but because it keeps you from making decisions that would have created deeper damage. While chaos pushed others to react, you chose restraint. What's often overlooked is that patience is not about waiting without action. It's about choosing the right action at the right time. You gathered information, you documented what mattered. You protected yourself where you could. You resisted the urge to retaliate or explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. That restraint preserved your credibility, and now that credibility matters more than ever. Visible justice doesn't arrive all at once. It shows itself through small but undeniable shifts. A ruling goes your way. A decision is reversed. A delay ends. Someone who once ignored you now responds. Systems that felt closed begin to open. Each of these moments confirms that patience was not wasted. It was preparing the ground. There is something powerful about watching justice unfold slowly. It allows truth to surface without being rushed. It gives space for patterns to become undeniable. When justice moves too fast, it can be questioned. When it moves with precision, it stands firm. What you're seeing now is not random progress. It is the result of time aligning with truth. During the storm, patience felt lonely. Others may have urged you to move on, to let it go, to accept loss as the cost of peace. But peace built on injustice is fragile. You understood that letting go too soon would have meant surrendering what mattered. So you waited not in bitterness, but in resolve. That resolve is now being rewarded. Visible justice brings clarity not just to outcomes, but to relationships. You begin to see who supported you quietly, who doubted you silently, and who benefited from your struggle. This awareness sharpens your discernment. It prepares you for what comes next. Patience also refined your character. It taught you how to remain grounded when circumstances were unstable. It strengthened your ability to separate emotion from decision. It gave you perspective that only time can provide. These qualities are not temporary, they stay with you long after the situation resolves. As justice becomes more apparent, you may feel a mix of relief and disbelief. Relief that progress is real, disbelief that the waiting is actually ending. This transition can feel disorienting. You lived in survival mode for so long that stability feels unfamiliar. But this is where healing begins. Visible justice doesn't always come with celebration. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through corrected records, restored rights, or enforced consequences. But quiet justice is still justice. It restores order, it validates endurance. It confirms that patience, when paired with integrity, carries weight. You didn't lose time by waiting. You gained leverage. You allowed the situation to reveal itself fully. And now, as justice takes shape in ways that can be seen and measured, the storm that once surrounded you begins to lose its grip. Restoration is unfolding, bringing peace, validation, and financial release in ways that feel both surprising and deserved. For a long time, peace felt out of reach. Your mind stayed busy replaying events, anticipating problems, bracing for setbacks. Even during quiet moments, tension lingered because nothing felt resolved. Restoration begins by easing that inner strain. Before circumstances fully change, your spirit settles. You start waking up without the same heaviness. Your thoughts slow down. Clarity replaces constant vigilance. Validation follows closely behind peace. Not the loud, public kind that demands attention, but the deep internal kind that confirms you are not wrong. You didn't overreact. You didn't misunderstand. You weren't imagining the imbalance. Validation arrives when facts align, when outcomes reflect reality, when accountability quietly confirms what you always knew. This kind of validation heals wounds that explanations never could. Financial release is part of this restoration, but it is not isolated from the emotional journey. Money tied up in conflict carries stress far beyond its numeric value. It affects choices, timing, confidence, and freedom. As release approaches, pressure lifts. You regain flexibility. Plans that were paused can move forward. Decisions no longer feel constrained by fear of loss. Financial restoration restores agency. This unfolding process may not match your original expectations. It may arrive through adjustments, reimbursements, settlements, or opportunities that compensate for what was delayed. Restoration is not always a straight line back to where you started. Often it leads you somewhere more stable, more secure, and more aligned with your growth. What matters is that the flow has changed direction. You may notice that your relationships shift during this time. When peace returns, you become more selective about who has access to your energy. Drama loses its appeal. Chaos feels unnecessary. Restoration sharpens your boundaries. You value calm, clarity, and mutual respect in ways you didn't before. This change protects what has been restored. Validation also frees you from the need to explain yourself. You no longer feel compelled to justify your choices or prove your experience. The outcome speaks for itself. This silence is not withdrawal, it is confidence. It allows you to move forward without carrying the weight of old narratives. As financial release becomes tangible, gratitude replaces anxiety. Not because the journey was easy, but because it was meaningful. You see how endurance strengthened you. You recognize how restraint protected you. You appreciate how timing worked in your favor, even when it didn't feel that way at the time. Restoration also brings perspective. You understand now that loss was not the end of your story. It was a chapter that reshaped your values, priorities, and resilience. What returns to you carries that wisdom with it. You manage it differently. You protect it more carefully. You use it with intention. Peace, validation, and financial release reinforce each other. Peace allows you to receive without fear. Validation allows you to trust your judgment again. Financial release allows you to act with confidence. Together, they create stability that goes beyond circumstances. This unfolding restoration does not erase the past, but it redeems it. What once caused pain now serves as proof of growth. What once felt unfair now feels resolved. And as each layer settles into place, you step into a season defined not by what was taken, but by what has been restored.